And so you'll be able to share that recording with your colleagues who are unable to attend. It will be posted on the BSA website under the Marketing and PR Network. So let's jump into the topic, which is, it's broad, it's big, and yet it's one that I think a lot of us struggle with. And it's about how to surface ideas within our firms, how to sort of, how do you find them? How do you hear about, how do you capture things that people are talking about and investigating? And then how do you sort of develop them and encourage them to become something more and something bigger? And ultimately to encourage a culture that supports that kind of learning and engagement across all levels of an organization. And so starting from the soil, how do you surface ideas? How do you find what people are talking about and interested in? Jennifer, I know at Payette, you've been thinking about this a lot.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we really are based on a philosophy that a great idea can come from anyone, and that, you know, it can be at any level in the firm. Everyone's having interesting conversations. It's not just principals, it's every level. It's from interns, all through everywhere. And we want to engage staff at all levels. We want to get all those voices heard. We want to be seen as a collective and not just, you know, okay, this is our kind of tailored, curated marketing agenda. And I think we try to really look to see who's having intellectual conversations around the office. Sometimes it's overhearing someone in the kitchen having an argument about curtain walls, or sometimes it's attending office events and some of our design discussions and pinups. It's finding who in the office is using social media a lot and what they're interested in, and saying, hey, would you like to write about that for our blog? So it's just kind of keeping your eyes and ears open, and sometimes it can be very organic, and you know, it's really a wonderful thing to see it all come together.
Yeah, I think we take a similar approach. I mean, I think it's, you know, the communication and the marketing people at Sasaki, we really try to, you know, embed ourselves into what's going on at the firm at any given moment. And I think that's part of what makes the work so interesting, is we get to kind of see and understand a lot of what's happening at the firm. I think at Sasaki, you know, there's always a lot happening at once, particularly with, you know, we have 3 different practice areas and we do a lot of different kinds of projects. So, you know, I think we try to be pretty intentional about having conversations about, you know, not just the projects that people are working on, but the issues that we're seeing out in the world, you know. So we recently had a meeting last week with all the campus sector principals across the different disciplines, where we really just used the 90 minutes to talk about, you know, what are the issues that people are seeing in their practices on campuses, and what are the things we're seeing in the context of chasing work, and what are the issues that are, you know, on the front of minds of our clients. And so those kinds of conversations, I think, are a little bit, they're very valuable for a lot of reasons, but they're also, you know, from that you can spin off different ideas. And it's not, you know, it's not a one-on-one thing where there's a lot of kind of pressure on an individual to generate. It's more of a group conversation. And from that, you can kind of, like I said, tease out some topics, follow up with people who, you know, had insightful ideas about those topics and seemed interested in them. So that kind of thing, I think, is something we're trying to be much more intentional about, particularly, you know, since we've been fully remote pretty much this whole time, and, you know, we're not bumping into each other in the office, and the impromptu discussions are much harder. So, you know, we're trying to do that much more. And I think Sasaki we have a really strong kind of design culture, as does Payette, and kind of intellectual culture. There's a lot of teachers. And so, you know, we do a lot of company meetings, design dialogues, we call them, where people share work that they're doing around particular topics. We also have a thing called 60-60-60, where we present 60 projects, each get 60 seconds in 1 hour. So it's like a rapid fire, you know, whatever, of like a lot of the work that's going on in the office at one time. So these are the things that we can learn from and source information from. Those are just a few of the things, but I think particularly during this extended period of remote work, we're really trying to be, much more intentional about having those conversations.
You're right, because those accidental meetings in the kitchen are much harder to have when, an 18th of your workforce is actually able to be in the kitchen at a time or whatever it is. I know that you guys have been back in the office for a little bit longer than some of the rest of us. But I'm interested. So Jennifer, I know that at Payette it's not called design dialogues. I think you call them alcove conversations, right?
We have alcove discussions. We have all these little pinup areas around the office that different teams are in charge of, if you will, and they often have their meetings there. Like they might have a meeting with the MEP engineer in the alcove, but then at certain points of the project, we'll have a design discussion there, and people just pull chairs around or stand around, and it's a wonderful thing because it's like everyone in the office goes to them. They're really interesting. We also do have a whole kind of pinup process, design showings, and we try to make sure that it's not just the principals talking, that it's people on different levels of the team. So sometimes we might have 5 or 6 people talking about the project, and it's a great way for them to kind of practice speaking, to learn about how to put a presentation together, but also for marketing, we can see what they're interested in, because we make sure someone from marketing goes to everything. And, we get ideas because we'll be like, oh, I saw you presented that thing on mass timber, part of your project. I didn't know anything about that. Maybe you want to do a series for the blog. So, it's a way to kind of figure out who's thinking about what and, how to make that happen.
Mm-hmm. I remember in our conversations with Joanna a week or two ago, Jennifer, we were talking about how marketing and communications professionals within firms almost have to play journalist within their own firm to find out what the scoop is. Are you finding that too, Doug, at Sasaki, that you're kind of responsible for antennae?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a big part of it, which can be a challenge. We have a lot of active projects at any one time across the different disciplines. So it's not the easiest thing to do. I think you could be full-time on just, sussing out what's happening at any given moment. Right. But I think it's like through these different avenues, we're structured with sectors and submarkets, and those meet monthly. And that's an opportunity where every time we meet, whether it's campus sports or civic parks or, developer work, whatever it might be, we use that time, with whomever can make it. Not everybody can make it all the time, but usually people prioritize it. And so we're using these meetings and these touch bases to talk about what's going on and what are the key projects that are coming up and what are the issues, like I said. So it's creating all of these touch points that provide the opportunity to kind of get in there and tease out what's going on. I think one of the things that we're trying to be much more proactive about is not just waiting for a project to be done, but really talking more about design process and in progress work, and what's the story of the project from maybe not inception, but at some point throughout, because we were finding that the volume of the planning work we were doing, it happens on a much faster pace.
Yeah.
There are 4, 6, sometimes 3, sometimes 12, depends. And the volume of that work is much more significant than the volume of the built work that we do just by nature. So we're trying to avoid, and therefore I think the volume of the content was skewing towards all the planning work we were doing, which frankly was reinforcing our reputation as a great planning firm, which we love to hear, but we also want to have a reputation as a great firm that builds stuff. So to that end, we're really trying to not, win the project and then wait 3 years till it's finished and we take pictures, but get the in progress conversations and processes and sketches and thinking into the communications mix, CA photos, like just more of that.
Yeah.
To balance that out. And that's something that we're actively always thinking about.
That seems like, go ahead, Jennifer.
Oh, I just wanted to add too, like when you were talking about the different market sectors and knowledge centers, I always find that a great place to kind of mine ideas, because we have a building science group, we have a space strategies group, we have design visualization, and you can do things and say, hey, do you guys want to take over Instagram for a month, or do you want to do a rendering of the month blog post, and you kind of get a cadence of things that you have in your back pocket. So if other people aren't writing stuff, you have like a group that they might assign someone, or they might put it on their review, like some of the younger people in the department, you should do one blog post a year, because really, what's one blog post a year? That's not a big deal.
I'm curious, is there in either of your organizations a way that you've found to embed communications champions within these groups? Or does marketing still have to play the role of, putting on the fedora, going out and finding the scoop for every single one of these groups? Because as I think you said, Doug, that could be a full-time job.
Yeah, we try, but it really is marketing going and kind of sussing stuff out.
All right. Well, I don't feel so bad anymore.
I think some people are more savvy than others. And if you find somebody that's interested,
Mhm.
like you work to mentor them and work with them and encourage them and do everything you can to be positive. And that is often really helpful.
Mhm.
Yeah, and to one of the Susan's question about who comes to these meetings, particularly on the more granular kind of submarket meetings. We try to make it a mix of people. It's principals, it's associate principals, we have senior associates. So it's a wide range of people who are involved in the marketing and communications process. Not everyone is, and that's okay, but some people are, and we try to make sure that it's not just a group of principals, but it's emerging leaders and others across the firm that are part of it. And I think historically, it was typically attended more by the marketing team, which at Sasaki, is more the folks who are chasing work and helping with BD and conferences and stuff. But we found that, and it was hard to get communications people, Joanna and her team, to those meetings, because there's a lot of them and they happen, there's 3 or 4 a week, right?
Right.
But in this remote work scenario, it's been a little bit easier because they can just dial into the Zoom call, do work, have it kind of going. And if something comes up relative to communications, they're there and in the loop. So that's made it a little bit easier for them to integrate into the conversation, which has been helpful. But even then, even before, we're tightly knitted together. So we share information, and anything good that spins out of these conversations finds its way to communications.
Your point about the virtual world in which we inhabit is an interesting one, because what we've talked about so far are ways to mine ideas from meetings and discussions that I think of as happening in person. But are there online tools now that in the last year and a half have become especially good places to find ideas to help them surface?
One thing, just, the basic that we record every alcove discussion and every pinup. So as we've moved into a more, like we're back in the office 3 days a week now, and it's more people are attending, and we're doing a hybrid where we'll also have people on a computer screen so they can watch that way as well. But they do record them, which is interesting because then you can go back later, or, as you said, if the marketing people can't go to so many, you could spend a Friday afternoon looking at what happened that week and kind of do it all in a chunk and then you get ideas across platforms, which is interesting. We've also been using Mural. I don't know if anyone out there is using that. It's like a design pinup space, and we tried a lot of different ones, and that was the one that kind of rose to the top. And we've even used it as a tool at a couple of interviews as well, and that went really successfully. So people have really liked that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a great idea about, recording those sessions. I think that's something that communications, we're not always, people aren't always there when these things are happening, particularly when we're trying to, like I said, talk more about the process and in progress work. Those are things we need to get out of people while things are happening. And so that I like that idea. so that marketing and communications can go back to it when they have the time. We use Miro a lot, which may be similar to Mural.
I can't
but
tell what
that's-
you're saying. I think you're saying mural and you're saying Miro.
Yes, exactly.
One Miro, mural on the wall. Got it. Okay.
Yep. They're too similar in name, but yeah. So that's something that design teams use. I'd say more often than communications, but that's also something that we can sometimes access, and just to see how things are going and what's happening and things like that.
What about the intranet? What about Slack? What do these platforms do for internal communications and the sort of identification or finding of ideas?
Well, we have a intranet that's basically set up as a blog format, but also with places where you can save and store different information. So you can have like information about marketing or about, any kind of topic. But also people can just type in anything they want. Basically, it's a wonderful thing because it goes from things from being like, oh, there are snacks in the kitchen, to being like, hey, I need help, I'm trying to find a EMI consultant, or what do you guys think of this, have you used it, spec this on your projects, kind of thing. But people get into conversations there and you start to see what they're interested in, and marketing actually minds that. And when we see something, we say, hey, you should write this for our external blog on the website because a lot of people would be interested. And most of the time everyone's really flattered and they're happy to be able to do that. So it's just kind of a nice thing. And I think people like that we're paying attention and have noticed them as well. So it's always good.
Yeah.
Yeah, we use Slack as well. And it's a fairly new thing, maybe it definitely got rolled out, while we were working remotely. So it's within the last year and a half or so. But it's been helpful. We, the team created a Slack channel for people to share ideas, or if they see something interesting in the news or out in the world, or they're speaking at a conference, or they did something that, we would want to get out in the world. That's really made it easier, I think, for people to share that. A lot of people are on Slack all the time, and it's, I think, created a little more engagement than just, sending emails off. So that's been effective. That's been effective for us. But I think people at Sasaki, and I think it's a testament to the communications and marketing team, that they feel, a lot of people feel engaged and empowered to share ideas and be part of the process. To Jennifer's point, right off the top, it's really getting people to feel like they can communicate, and that the barrier to getting the ideas out, and most things flow through communications as the kind of publishers of the information through our various channels, but we really try to make it easier for people to get the information out there, so that it's not such a kind of a heavy lift to do that. So I think things like social media and then news and blog posts and things like that, we're really trying to get people more engaged and contributing to that process.
Right. I see a question that Sandy put up in the chat, and I think this is for both of you, but it goes right to what you were talking about, Doug. And it's with dozens of projects and multiple sectors, it's hard to prioritize. Do you monitor exterior articles or press to see what other design firms are talking about? Does that feed where design or thought leadership goes? We'll come back to that term later.
Yeah, it's a good question.
Now.
We definitely struggle with that. It's an issue. Prioritization is an issue, and I think there's a few challenges to that, because there are certain individuals and parts of the practice who are more adept at generating content and being part of the process, which is great. And but there are other individuals and part of the practice that aren't as good as that. So I think that gets into the prioritization question, which is how do you encourage the people who are naturally good at it, excuse me, but maintain that balance, because we do want to come across as a balanced firm across all of our different practice areas. So I know the team is always keeping an eye on that. And if we're light in a particular area, we need to push a little harder on that area to generate that content, so that, there is a balance across the different practice areas.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that helps too is, there's a wide variety, as we all know, of like outlets, so there's like the national press, and we've been pretty successful recently with some high profile projects. And we also work with Nickerson, the PR firm, who's been great. They really helped us get more national attention, both in design press, but also in more general interest, like the City Hall project was in Forbes recently, like that kind of thing. For the really high profile projects, that's not going to play, all of our work is not going to play at that level, right? And so I think part of it is when you're thinking about national press, you really have to think about what's going to be interesting to those publications, and it's not going to be every single thing that we do. So at that level, there is a kind of almost a forced prioritization about what's the media interested in at this given moment, and what are we doing to kind of play into that. And our PR firm is really good about helping us through that.
Yeah.
I think at a more granular level is like, for the different professional organizations that we're a part of, SCUP and Campus Rec and, NRPA for parks and all the like alphabet soup of acronyms that we're involved with. Those are opportunities where you can really get granular about issues. And if somebody has a really specific thing that they're interested in about a particular part of the practice, it's a lot easier to get engaged and contribute to those organizations because we sponsor them, we exhibit, we speak with them. So we have pretty close relationships. So I think it's like, what's the spectrum of, from Forbes to, athletic business and everything in between. You can really kind of create a broad range of opportunities for people.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that answered the question, but that's what came to my mind.
I'm going to read Regina Sibiana's. I'm sorry about your last name if I mispronounced it, but she said, taking on these thought leadership pieces across multiple disciplines can be a lot of work. How many people do you have on your marketing teams dedicated to communications? Any strategies for better dividing the work to keep on top of the influx of ideas?
I'm going to pile on one additional question, which is, can you let us know how many people are at your firms? Because I didn't ask that question up front. And as we're talking about your multiple dozens of organizations across your firms, it would be good to know how many people you're working with.
So Payette has about 160 people in one office in Boston. So we're all on one floor, upstairs from the BSA. And our marketing group, there's 5 core people, but I also work with another associate principal who handles social media. So she's somebody who has a very big interest in that, and she handles the strategy for that, and she works with my team to execute the different social media strategies. And then, so the other group, we all actually do a little bit of everything. Like there are some people who are more focused on PR and design awards and the website, and then there are others who do both PR and proposals, and most of it is a balance, because we found that it's hard to just have one person dedicated to it, because inevitably something comes up and you need people to do other things. So there's definitely and it's hard to prioritize too, because we were talking about this earlier. A proposal has a deadline, it's due Friday. An interview is on Tuesday. Put everything you have into it. And then the PR stuff doesn't have a deadline. So you kind of have to make your own, but then when, the chips are down, you're like, well, do we work on this interview? Do we get the blog post up? The interview is always going to win. And it's frustrating, because you know how it is. You cycle through one after the other, and before you know it, 6 months have gone by and you're like, oh, I guess we should have been paying attention to you.
Yeah, so we're so we have about 280 people in Boston, and we have an office, a newish office in Denver that's growing rapidly. There's I think six or seven people there, and then our office in Shanghai, which has between 15 and 20 people. But the marketing, the majority of them, each of those offices has a marketing person in them. but we collaborate closely across projects and geographies and things. We're at a scale where we can have separate resources for marketing and BD and communications. We used to just sit all together and we work closely together, but they are separated, which makes it a little bit easier, to Jennifer's point about, the pursuit is always going to take priority, because we have people that don't chase work at all. They just are focused on communications full time. So Joanna leads that group as director of communications. There's a communications manager who works closely with her, and we have 2 communications coordinators. So between them, they deal with pretty much everything related to PR and communications. We also have a manager level person who manages awards, photography, all the website stuff, and all of the kind of visual resource management. So she kind of bridges, and she works with a fellow who is our photographer and also helps with awards and website and image management and things like that. So, and then the marketing team that I work most closely with, like I said, is separate but connected, and that helps us kind of attack both fronts simultaneously. So that's how we're set up.
Yeah, that's helpful background. Thanks for the question, Regina, and thanks for the answers. I think we spent a bunch of time on how to find the ideas, where you find the ideas, who's responsible for surfacing them, and what I'd love to know now is what happens next. And Jennifer, I heard you say blog, and I know how important the blog is at your firm. So will you tell us what happens to ideas next?
Yes, absolutely. So it depends a lot on what the person who had the idea wants. So some people are very comfortable writing and they want to write the whole thing themselves and they're excited about it. Some people just want to have an idea and need to be encouraged, and we're happy to ghostwrite for them. We're happy to take notes. We're happy to interview them. They can do bullet, like we pretty much mold to fit whatever their style is, because we want to help them. And we know everyone's super busy. And we also, I feel very strongly that part of marketing's role is to help keep the billable people billable, so that they're not spending. I mean, it's important to spend time on this, but it's also like, if we can help make it easier on them and get something out, we want to do everything in our power to do that. And, we try to keep their voice. So we don't try to edit it to the point where it sounds too much like a corporate thing. Like, we want it to sound like the person that wrote it. Like, if an intern wrote something, we're not going to try to make it sound like this polished thing that's going in a brochure. And I think it's kind of the opposite of what you do for a proposal, where you want to take all the different writing from different sections and make it sound like one voice. But with the blog, you want to sound like many voices in a collective. And it's fine if, sometimes we just have like an image essay. Like, it's like, just, have an experience. Say, I just designed my first lab. Why don't you write a blog post about it? Or I just went to my first photo shoot. Like, there's so many like little fun things you can do that don't even have to have hardly any text at all.
And your blog is external on your website, and the individuals who write the piece, whether they write or whether you ghostwrite in their shoes, they're the ones whose names are associated with each post, right?
Absolutely. And we have little blog author profiles on our website for each person, because we want to promote them. We don't, in marketing, we realize it's not about our ego, it's about helping them get ahead. And I think it's great too, because then we'll send them the link, they'll share it on social, they'll share it with their networks on LinkedIn. I think it's just a nice thing to be able to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you guys do a great job at that. I've always been impressed at the way that you amplify kind of the voices of the individuals at the firm. That's something that I think we could do better, frankly. We definitely, if you kind of cruise around our website, it's definitely a mix of individual bylines, and there's a good amount of kind of omnipotent Sasaki voice, which I think is a good balance. But I think we could, we're always trying to do that more. And like I said before, make it easier for people to contribute, right? So that it's not, it doesn't take a ton of time, and it doesn't have to be 2,000 words of heady content. So that's something we've definitely been working on. We were at one time doing a lot of that, really kind of intense, long form thought leadership writing. And I think people in general don't have as much time to do that. And I think people don't have as much time or attention to actually read that stuff. So we're definitely, well, we still try to do some of that. I think, when we have a good idea, and there's definitely more ideas get generated than executed on, that's for sure.
Mhm.
But when it is something that gets some momentum behind it, I think we're trying to make it a little shorter, a little easier to digest. We're playing around a lot more with the video, just making the content easier to produce and easier to digest is something that we're definitely trying to do more of. And, we launched this new website not too long ago, which in and of itself creates a need to generate a lot of stuff, because there's a lot more nooks and crannies, and there's a lot more places to put content and describe different parts of the practice. So that's kind of an engine to generate content to keep that thing humming. So that's been helpful.
Yeah.
But I think similar to what Jennifer said, I think, and what was discussed before, there is a good amount of journalistic approach to sitting with someone who's interested in writing about something. And I know the comms team does this a lot, and asking the questions, getting the information out, potentially ghostwriting a first draft. That's the most time intensive way to do it, and there's only so many resources that we have to put towards that, but we do that, and that's always effective. But like I said, we can't do that too much because it takes a lot of communications resources to do.
Yeah, it's clear that the cultivation of ideas is not effortless. And so somebody deciding which ideas have legs is an important part to deciding where to put your resources. But are there, besides, Jennifer saying this idea has legs, or, Joanna and her team decide, are there other considerations like strategic plans or communication strategy documents for which ideas are cultivated, or which dictates which ideas get the attention?
I think we do that in kind of an organic way. Like, I don't think we have like a set, document that we're going to get, X number of blog posts about healthcare versus this, but we try to balance our healthcare and our science writing. We try to balance the conferences we go to as well. I think sometimes somebody gets all fired up about writing something that they'll even like submit a draft, and you're like, oh, we kind of can't use this, like somebody will be like, well, I want to write about how contractors don't know how to build anymore, and I'm like, no, we're not writing that. It's like yeah, okay, you have an issue, and I'm not trying to, of course, stifle their voice, but I'm also like, well, we also have to be a professional business. Like, we're not gonna say anything bad about colleagues, but I also think a lot of times I try to encourage people to take one idea and do it through multiple platforms. So if you come back from a conference, write a blog post about it, write a paper about it. Maybe we can turn it into an abstract. I mean, we write so many conference abstracts that don't get accepted that we can then use them to build off of blog post. It's like we have all this content we sometimes generate, and it's easy to just forget about it and to move on to the next year's conference. So it's like we try to reuse things as much as possible.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. Conferences, for folks who are really dialed into BD, conferences feel like big networking events. And yet the actual information, attained through attending a conference, to presenting at a conference, can sometimes be lost as soon as the abstract's submitted, or as soon as somebody unpacks their rollerboard. So you encourage people to then, share that back out with the firm.
So
Yeah,
Susan Elmore, she had a question. Unless, Doug, do you want to comment before I read her question?
Oh, yeah, briefly. I mean, I think it's a similar approach, right? There's no, it's more of an organic I think the people involved in each of the different practice areas and sub-markets and things like that, we maintain a rhythm of conversation and meetings and things like that and strategy discussions where, we don't necessarily need to like document it into like a formal thing. It also evolves so quickly sometimes. We do every couple of years, we're going through a strategic planning process for the firm in general. And that's going to be a guiding document for sure in terms of the different practice areas, what their goals and strategies are as a practice. And that will definitely inform and trickle down into what are the things we need to prioritize, back to the prioritization, right? What are the things we need to prioritize? What are the things that we need to focus on in light of the broader firm strategic plan and each of the strategic plans for the three main practice areas. So that is helpful. On a more granular level though, at like, let's say the sub-market level, of which there are many, it is more of an organic kind of evolving conversation among the people involved about, and I think it's a lot of it's like, we want to say things that our potential clients find interesting and potential employees as well, so that they're going to hire us or so that we can hire them, right? So I think a big part of it is like not what we think is interesting necessarily, but it's like, what are our clients interested in? How do we want to engage them in this content? And that often helps, drive the content and the things that we talk about. So that's something that we definitely fold into it a lot.
Right. Business development governing with communications to some extent.
Right, and vice versa. Yeah.
And I also think things tend to cluster. Like, I don't know if you've experienced this, Doug, but I notice RFPs cluster where it's like, oh, we'll start getting data science RFPs and then we'll get 5 in a row. And it's like, oh, okay, everybody's building data science, I guess, or everyone's building molecular engineering or something. And it's always interesting to me how that always happens. So it's kind of like, oh, well, if we know over the next month we have these interviews coming up, let's write some blog posts about engineering. Or, it's like, let's get that tailored into our BD thing. We even do things, we look at our website analytics, and if we see like a college or university hitting on our website, we go, oh, maybe they have a science building coming up. Maybe we should call them for a meet and greet. It's like, you try to, mine anything that you can. But I fully agree. It's like trying to get things that our clients are going to get excited about and interested in is really important as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we do that sometimes. Like if there's like a really big interview and we have a sense that whomever, on the client side is going to maybe be checking out our website, we try to bump some content that's specific to that, so that it's a little more on the fore. So that's a good point. We try to do that. We can't always do it, but it's something that we think about. And Joanna is great about like talking to me about that. Like, hey, is there anything really hot that will help us, shape the way that we're doing things? So yeah, that's a good point.
So all of this conversation is making me think about tools, because like my mind is like reeling just thinking about how many different tabs you have to have in your brain to keep track of all of these different priorities. Are there tools that your firms use to keep track of all of the ideas and all the opportunities to share them? What are they? Everybody's taking notes now. Everybody's got a pen. So how do you do it? Or are you superhumans? Come on, what do you do, Jennifer?
We tend to go for the simpler tools, to be honest with you. Like, we have an Outlook calendar with all the social media posts, and we put in ideas, and then when we set a date for them, we actually put the date in them so everybody in marketing can see that and share it. But yeah, I wish there was some great master way to organize everything, but and if other people are doing stuff like Doug, I'd love to hear what you're doing. It's a little more organic, and we do fall into the trap of keeping things in our heads, and we're trying to keep each other informed and not always be like, oh, I didn't know about this. Did you know about this? Who knew about it? You know, so there's always a little bit of that. I think it's like inevitable.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I'll speak for Joanna and team. They're incredibly organized, and I think, and I'm not as hands-on with the tools, so that's the one thing that I wasn't able to get ahead of in the short notice. But I do know for, let's say, for conferences and speaking deadlines and some of that more external stuff that is a little more on the BD side, that's all integrated into Salesforce with all of our other pursuit stuff. So that's helpful. We try, and for photography as well, and awards. So all that stuff is like in Salesforce. So anything with like, kind of like anything like that with like that bridges into the marketing side of things, we try to keep integrated. So that's helpful.
Yeah.
I know that Sarah, the woman who manages our website, uses Airtable, which is like kind of like a super sophisticated Excel software that I see her use and I am impressed by, but I have never used myself. And so anything that has to do with the website, and I think thought leadership and ongoing communications, they use Airtable as well, which is I think from what I've seen, a pretty effective way to manage kind of like a lot of information, a lot of ongoing information that needs to kind of get acted on. I guess it's a little bit like a smart sheet, which we use too, or we used to use, we've kind of shifted over to Airtable. So yeah, but I think, and Sasaki isn't that unique. Like everyone has a lot of things going on at the same time, but I do feel like on the communications front, particularly with our PR firm, there is a lot to wrangle, and they do a great job doing that.
Right. Oh, go ahead.
No, sorry. Go ahead, Kate.
No, you.
I just want to read Susan's email then, because it goes along with what you guys are talking about as far as the blogs. She states, for the blogs, and sorry, my lights are turning off. How do you address fears about sharing ideas that may not be fully formed or perfect yet? Blue sky thinking can be very exciting internally, but the half-baked, unproven aspect of it tends to strike fear of judgment from clients or peers in the minds of potential writers.
Wow.
Good question.
Yeah.
I think for us, there's a couple different areas of that question that come into my mind. For like design work, project work, I do think that we want to make sure that, and this is something that ties back to what I said, which is actually something that we wrestle with a little bit when we're showing in progress work. It has to have hit some milestone where the client feels comfortable and we feel comfortable sharing that, because things evolve and change obviously throughout the design process. So that's something we really need to balance, particularly if it's and having the clients okay that we can talk about in progress work. And there's many things that we are doing, particularly for, I'd say, more on the corporate and commercial side, the workplace projects, developer projects, that we just can't talk about, and it kills us because it's like, this is so awesome, but we can't talk about it because of, plenty of good reasons on the owner side. So it really is almost a case-by-case conversation at the project level of like, okay, can we talk about it? What can we show? What does the client feel comfortable with, et cetera? So that's definitely an ongoing conversation. And, at Sasaki, we don't, at times we don't back away from social issues either, because people are very passionate about it. And a lot of our practice areas intersect with, a lot of what's been going on in the world in the past number of years. And so those are much more sensitive conversations and tend to involve, our board and CEO and things like that. And so we're really intentional and thoughtful when we voice opinions about particular issues out in the world. And that's, like I said, that's something that senior leadership weighs in on. And we have at the board, I don't want to get into the mechanics of it too much, but on our board, we do have one of our principals is the chair of external relations is her title. And so she has her own practice and is very busy. But also at her board responsibility really thinks about how we message some of this stuff out into the world. And she works closely with Joanna and I on that. So there is a direct line into, the board, which governs our firm, and our CEO to talk about these issues, particularly if they're sensitive, which I think is a little different than part of the question you asked, but I did want to bring that up because it is something that at times we don't really, we don't all shy away from, but we try to be really thoughtful about it.
We have, so thank you both for all of this. I have more notes than I even did after our conversation last week. So there's a lot of food for thought here. I want to be mindful of the time. We've only got about 15 or 20 minutes left before the end of the session. And I would love to open the floor up to Q&A. So feel free to you can throw questions into the chat, or you could turn on your video and ask questions directly. I'm going to take the privilege of the person with the video on right now and ask mine first to kick us off, which is that it seems like a lot of the success of what you're doing at Payette and Sasaki comes down to creating a culture of ideas and a culture of internal communication. And it's sort of a chicken and the egg question. Do you start by how do you develop the culture that then feeds into the sort of cultivation and the sharing and the creation of ideas?
I think you have to do it early and often. You have to, if there's like opportunities, like we often have like all staff like meetings once a week. There is an opportunity to put in, hey, we're always looking for stuff for the blog or for social media. If we have a specific series, like on Instagram, we do a Sunday Sketches series. So we're always talking with people about what they want to share. And then once they see it, people start coming to us because they get excited about it, which is nice. But it's also making sure the principals are involved and they're talking it up. And if, the president's making a speech about something, he'll say, oh, and don't forget, it's important to write for social media. Or even like, we try to set aside different conferences that we know some of the younger people would go to as like kind of a learning testing ground where they can learn how to work through a presentation, how to do it. Like we'll give them the support they need. We'll do dry runs with them. And that enables them because they're the future of the firm. Like I think the leadership is very interested in getting other people out there speaking at conferences. They don't want it to all be the principals all the time. They want it to be the younger people on staff, the people who are just out there working on the jobs that, they're making those client connections. And I think it's really important just to always reinforce that and try to give them whatever help they might need to make them want to come to marketing and make it easy for them too. Because I think sometimes we can be kind of this, this scary, like they're running around crazy. We don't know what to do. They work with the principals, so you try to work on getting more of a relationship there too is always good.
Yeah, I totally agree. I don't know that I have much more to add to that. I will say that I think, a culture of design curiosity and initiating of ideas and things like that, that's something that, I take and Joanna probably takes very little responsibility or credit for. Like I think our firm has been like that for a long time since Hideo Sasaki started it, right? And so we're just in some ways trying to tap into it and maybe amplify it as best we can. And to Jennifer's point, it's like you got to do it early and often across all channels and make it easy for people because it's happening in the ecosystem of Sasaki. We're just trying to like shepherd it and curate it a little and get it out in the world. But yeah, no, that's I think it's having that. A lot of it is just having that culture inherently. It's something that people are passionate about.
I even like when it's around review time, I take the opportunity to talk to some of the different department directors and say, hey, you know, if your group is looking for a SMART goal, why not have one blog post in the next year? Like, it's a great thing they can put on as a goal. It's like, it's an easy thing to do. It's not overwhelming. It's not like we're asking for one a month or something. So, you know, that just kind of getting that awareness out there, because I think people don't know sometimes how valued it is by everyone in the firm and how important it is, and just kind of making sure that, you know, you're telling people this is so important for you to be able to be another face of the firm.
Does that then show up in employee reviews, Jennifer?
I mean, it's not a requirement, but the reviews do have SMART goals, and sometimes people are struggling trying to find them, and it's like, you know, I'll go to different, like we have a design visualization department. I'll be like, look, you have 4 people. If each writes 1 blog post a year, I mean, that gets the word out, that gives you more thing to links to on your part of the website. It's like kind of a win-win for everybody, so.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. You know, we do try to integrate it into we call it reflection and planning, which is our review process. And, you know, each of the different professional levels in the firm, you know, associate, senior associate, principal, principal, when you're getting to a senior associate level, it's in there. You know, there's an expectation that people will contribute to the externalization of the firm, and that takes many forms, right? But that's something that kudos to you know, CEO and others who run the practice and HR to really integrate that into the conversation. And I think when people do it and they write something and there are pictures on the blog with their name, and people realize once they get into it the value of it. And so you just kind of want to get them going, and then they hopefully see like, oh, this isn't that hard and it pays off, and I'm going to keep doing it, you know?
Yeah. Thanks so much. Are there other questions now that I've hogged the question limelight?
I have a question. This is Julia. Hi. I've put my question in the chat, but I think that's okay. So I just wanted to ask, I help out with social media at Perkins and Will, and there are so many social media tools out there that help schedule Instagram posts in advance and Twitter posts, LinkedIn, etc. And I was wondering if you guys use any of those social media specific tools to help schedule and manage.
I know that we do. I just don't know the name, but I'll follow up. I can follow up with you. You know, we definitely, you know, the folks who run the social channels, you know, I know there's one tool that we use, I think that integrates to all of them so that they can schedule them to hit at various times. But I can follow up with you, Julia, if you want.
Thanks.
I made a note of it. We're going to hold you to it.
I know that we've used Hootsuite in the past, and so I believe I haven't used it myself. I believe that's pretty effective at looking at all the different channels. But I also think that you know, sometimes we get in a cadence where it's like, okay, you know, this certain day we're going to post, and sometimes I think we just do it. It's you know, sometimes it can be a little organic. Maybe we need more tools. I don't know.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Julia. Other questions that folks have?
Actually, I sort of have a question either to Doug or to the group. Like Doug, you were talking about a bunch of different tools like Salesforce and Airtable and Smartsheet, and I don't know, sometimes when I get a new tool like that, I get all excited and I use it for like a week, and then it's like I just go back to doing it the way we've always done it. And I don't know if that's it seems weird because we have so much. We've got, you know, you've got a Slack or a Teams channel, you've got email, you've got this, people are texting you, you've got 2 phones, and like at some point you're just like, well, are these tools helping me, or is it just one more thing? I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's a real thing, kind of like tool overkill. You know, we launched Slack, we still have GChat. I mean, it's like it's coming at you from all directions. I think, and I would love to get other people's opinions. I think for Salesforce, it's such a critical tool to what we do that's like, you know, we're in there all day, all the time. So that's like kind of not going anywhere. You know, I think that the Airtable from what I understand, people really jumped into that, and now that's, I think, an important part of the workflow, at least for the website, as far as I'm aware. So we try to keep it. We're very adverse to adopting new tools. We really spend some time like, okay, how does this play out? Like in terms of like additional administrative work versus the efficiency gained and all that stuff. And so, yeah, it's definitely something we're careful not to like overload it, you know?
Other questions from the group? I'm not good at silences, so I'll give you a few seconds to get the courage up without saying anything else. Sandy says that Ascentech has adopted Slack for messaging in common with you guys. It sounds like, and Trello for task calendars, and both are great. I've heard good things about Trello, Sandy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just set up a marketing planning calendar yesterday in Trello, and it was like, okay, wow, we already been using it for tracking quals and proposals, and it just seemed like the next thing, you know, the next step. And I don't know, I really like it. It's just very quick and visual and kind of pretty. It's got colors.
I don't want to tell you how I track our proposal deadlines. I actually have a big calendar on my wall and I write them down in Sharpie. Sometimes, I don't know, sometimes the methods work, you know.
Whatever works. That's a lot cheaper than Salesforce.
And if it's pending, I put it on a Post-it. It doesn't get the Sharpie until it's a definite go. So it's
Okay.
like, that's my code.
You can't argue with success, Jennifer. We've been talking about what to do to sort of cultivate a culture of ideas, to identify ideas, to sort of bring them out and make them public. And I hate to be the one also always asking the questions, but I've just got so many. And my next one's about what you do after that. I mean, you got your blog post, either because somebody wrote it or you ghost wrote it, but it's got somebody's name on it and it's public. You've got your social media post, maybe it has somebody's name on it, Doug. How do you keep track of all of the blog posts and social media posts that are out there to figure out like what happens next to them? Is it on the poster to decide this thing's got legs, we're going to submit it for a conference? Or do you go track people down and say, your idea has legs, we want to submit it for a conference? Do you go back to your master calendar of all the conferences? What happens next with these publicized ideas?
I think it's a little of both. I think when we tend to look at the conference calendar every 6 months or so to see what we want to be submitting to. And, you know, one thing we do is not only do we scan the blog, but we talk to different groups saying, okay, you know, of course, this is going to be about planning. So we talk to our space strategies group and we, you know, you get different information to be able to use, but sometimes people want to do things. Sometimes people want to speak and write. Sometimes people want to write and not speak. So we try to kind of tailor it to however the person wants to do it as well. But yeah, I think definitely you can always use your blog to mine stuff. Like I'm always going back and seeing, okay, what's been here over the last month or so and what are the trends? And you're always kind of thinking that through and trying to make those kinds of connections.
Hearing you, it almost sounds like the blog then serves as your internal communications funnel, so that you really, after playing reporter and a journalist across your organization, all ideas go into that funnel, and that's where you go to find out where the award, or maybe not the award, but where the conference abstract, where the white paper, like that's where what you go, that is your database.
It really is actually, because even like right before each conference, we tend to publicize it on the blog. So when people are signing up for their sessions, they'll know about it. So it's like at the end of the year when someone's like, oh, what conferences was I in? You can just go to the blog, type in conferences. We have it hashtagged, it all comes up. And it does almost serve as a database. I mean, of course, we keep Excel files and things as well, but listening to you guys, I'm starting to think I need a more integrated system because we have like an Excel file for conferences, an Excel file for an awards, an Excel file for photography. You know, at some point, you know, it gets a bit silly. Maybe they all need to be together.
Yeah, one thing that popped into my mind about what to do after, once you have the piece. One of the things we've been experimenting with, kind of dipping our toes in the water, is paid social campaigns. So, like on LinkedIn, for example, you can really zoom in on a particular group of individuals, whether it's by geography or title or whatever, and get that information into their feed. And it's not that expensive. Like we had a piece in Arc Record, which was a big deal for us. And so we did, and a few other things that we've done with LinkedIn in particular, where you can kind of send it to, a really tailored group of individuals and see what the results are. So that's something that we set aside a little bit of money for every year and play around with. But it's been an interesting exercise to try to kind of get things off the blog and into other people's feeds, so to speak, who aren't necessarily following us on social.
Regina had one question too. She asked, how much weight do you put on direct email marketing? We do a lot of website, blog, and social, but not sure if we need to build that up.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'll jump in. We were doing, we used to do one external newsletter to our entire mailing list. I think it was quarterly. And then we shifted to more focused ones based on our civic, campus, and commercial practices with like kind of tailored lists. And it got to the point where it was a lot of work and it didn't feel like it was that effective for the work that we were putting into it. So we stopped sending those out. We kind of made the decision like we can use our time more strategically for other things. And so we'll send out direct emailers. If there's like a big notice, hey, we opened the Denver office, that's kind of a big deal. Or if there's like a really important conference and we want to get a note out about our involvement and that kind of thing. So it's more ad hoc now than having like, okay, every quarter we get to put this together.
Yeah, ours is the same. It's organic when we have news and when we have like a group of news we want to put together. Although I do think that like an email blast or a newsletter does sometimes reach people who may not be on social media, who might not be looking at our blog, and it's just another way to drive traffic to our website. So like our strategy has always been that we want people to come back to our website. So when we're putting something on like Twitter or LinkedIn, we're trying to get them into the link to our website, to our blog. That's always the goal. So, the email blast is just another way to do that. That might meet some clients and things who might not be looking at all the other things because everybody's so busy. Although they might not look at the email blast either. They might just delete it like everyone else does. But let's hope not.
And just because I emailed the communications folks about the social media tools and they got back to me. So it sounds like we use repost, which is something to share other content on our channel, other people's content on our channels. And then later is a tool that we use to like schedule things.
Later as in later hosen? No,
as in,
later
as in
day.
later, as in
Not now.
Why would it be later hosen?
the opposite
Why do
of
I
now.
even? All right. Later. I've never heard of it. Cool. I don't know. It's almost Oktoberfest. This is my, all right. All right. Thank you for getting back to us about that. It's 9:31. We closed it out. I didn't even get to laugh about the phrase thought leadership. We were really going to dig in, but maybe we'll hold that for another time. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Doug. Thank you, Marcia. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. It's been informative, and I have so many action items now.
Well, I appreciate the invitation. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, likewise.
All right. Thank you. And we'll be back next month, 4th Wednesday of the month from now on. And it'll probably be a back to school event where we can sit around and talk about what the heck has been happening, since last we all spoke, find out what the return to office is like, find out what continued not return to the office is like, and kind of kvetch and get ready for the rest of the program year. So see you in October, everybody.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.